Hi everybody, my name is Cameron and today we're going to be looking at hormones, specifically the endocrine system, glucose control, menstrual cycle, your metabolism, as well as plant hormones. So a majority of your hormones are controlled by something called the endocrine system. Now the endocrine system is going to be a group of glands in your body that are going to release certain hormones to try to keep a homeostasis in your body. So hormones are chemicals that coordinate a response between organs and the body. Okay, so these glands that we're talking about are our effectors. If you remember from our lesson of the nervous system, these glands will be the effectors. Okay, they are what releases the hormone once, so they're the response, let's say, to a certain unbalancing in your body. So a majority of your hormones are controlled by something called negative feedback, which basically means if one hormone drops, okay, it will stimulate the secretion of another hormone to stimulate that hormone rising back up. But as that hormone rises back up, it is going to inhibit the hormone that originally stimulated it. Okay, so when it comes to something like thyroxine, as your thyroid, so controlled by your thyroid gland, okay, as your thyroxine levels drop, TSH, your thyroxine stimulating hormone, is going to increase, okay? This is then going to stimulate thyroxine increase, but thyroxine itself is going to inhibit TSH, okay? So as thyroxine starts to increase, it's going to decrease TSH. And that's the negative feedback mechanism that we're talking about. It basically prevents over secretion of a certain hormone. Now when it comes to non-negative feedback, this is something like your adrenaline. Okay, your adrenaline, if it is secreted, it is just going to increase the levels of all your hormones, and none of those hormones are going to regulate the adrenaline per se. They are just going to be increased, they're going to be heightened. And this makes sense because when you need adrenaline, it's because you've entered a fight or flight response to something, and all of your bodily processes, your metabolism needs to increase all of a sudden. You see, so there's no time for that negative feedback loop. Okay, so the first process we're going to be looking at is your glucose level controls within your blood. Okay, so when we eat something, we are going to absorb the glucose into our blood system. Now, if we have too much glucose in our blood, this can be dangerous, and we'll get to that soon. So how do we control our levels of glucose to a safe point? Okay, we are going to use a hormone that is secreted by the pancreas, known as insulin. Now, insulin is going to bind to receptors in our muscles, okay, and it's going to decrease the amount of glucose in our blood. Okay, so when those receptors are stimulated by the insulin, they are going to start taking in glucose and converting it and storing it as glycogen. Okay, and if your blood glucose levels drop too low, then we are going to have glucagon, which will be secreted as well by the pancreas, and that glucagon is going to stimulate the conversion of glycogen back into glucose and putting it back into the bloodstream. So our hormones here for glucose control are insulin, which will decrease glucose levels in the blood, and glucagon, which are going to increase the glucose levels in our blood. Okay, so what happens if you have an issue with producing this hormone, insulin? Well, this is when we get diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is when your body, or your pancreas specifically, doesn't produce enough insulin. Okay, this is something that you are born with, so it's hereditary, it's genetic. And so when we don't produce enough insulin, okay, it means that the glucose levels are going to stay in our blood, they're going to stay high, and they're not going to be absorbed into the muscles. Okay, so that means a lot of it's going to be secreted Okay, it's going to be rather excreted, okay, and it's not going to be absorbed, so we can't use it. So when you need that glucose and there isn't enough of it in your blood, your body is going to start breaking down fats and muscles to get the glucose, okay, the fats and muscles of glycogen. So ways to treat this is with insulin injections, and ways to cure this would be stem cell research, so where they try to genetically modify your pancreas to stimulate it to create more insulin, or pancreas transplant is also possible. Now the second type of diabetes is one that you develop due to a poor lifestyle and poor dietary practices. So this is caused by your body producing enough insulin, or your pancreas producing enough insulin, okay, or not producing enough insulin. I know it sounds weird, but either your pancreas is not producing enough insulin anymore, or it's producing enough insulin, but the receptors that I was talking about earlier are not responding to that insulin anymore due to the incredibly high amounts of insulin, glucose that is usually in your blood. I hope that makes sense. So it's more towards your body becoming too used to it. Okay, too used to these high levels of insulin. So people with type 2 diabetes are going to also require insulin injections. Okay, but it can also be cured by just changing your lifestyle and eating healthier, exercising more, losing weight. So a lot of people that are obese will have this type 2 diabetes. So losing weight can help these receptors get used to the insulin again and get used to lower levels of insulin and become more responsive to it, and allow your pancreas to also produce enough insulin. Okay. So another cycle that is controlled by hormones is the menstrual cycle. Now the menstrual cycle is going to start with follicular stimulating hormone. Now what this does is it's going to stimulate the maturity of the egg within the ovaries. Okay. What it's also going to do is it's going to stimulate the production of estrogen. Now this FSH is controlled by the pituitary gland in the brain. Okay, so once estrogen has been stimulated, it is going to cause the lining of the uterus to develop. So this lining of the uterus takes time to grow and to become ready for the implantation of the egg. Now, estrogen is also going to inhibit the production of FSH. So that is a negative feedback. FSH is increasing the amount of estrogen, and estrogen is going to decrease the amount of FSH. Okay, so FSH is going to stimulate egg maturing, okay, and it's going to stimulate estrogen. Estrogen is going to start the development of the uterus lining, and it's going to inhibit FSH. Afterwards, estrogen is also going to stimulate luteinizing hormone, okay, which is the next step. So luteinizing hormone is going to trigger ovulation. Okay, so once estrogen levels hit a certain point, that's going to start stimulating luteinizing hormone, so they increase together. And then as the luteinizing hormone is enough, it's going to stimulate the ovulation period. Okay, so it's going to trigger ovulation, and then after ovulation, it is going to release progesterone, which maintains the lining of that uterus. Okay, so as your progesterone levels increase, it's going to keep the lining there, and as soon as, and it's also going to further inhibits the release of FSH, okay, because at this point of ovulation, we really don't need another egg to be matured and released. Okay, we are going to be dealing with that mature egg that will probably be in the fallopian tubes by now, and the progesterone is going to maintain that lining so that the egg, fertilized egg, can implant itself in the lining. Okay, and this is going to inhibit the release of FSH and luteinizing hormone, because both of those are going to be stimulating more eggs. We don't want that. Okay. So yeah, and then as progesterone levels decrease, that is going to cause a period. Okay, that is going to cause the shedding of that lining. Okay, and then the whole cycle will start again with an increase in follicular stimulating hormone. Okay, as soon as that progesterone stops. So here we can see a table that helps us visualize the menstrual cycle a bit more. So initially, the uterus lining has shed. Okay. Now we need to start stimulating a new egg to be produced. So follicular stimulating hormone is initially released. This is going to stimulate the maturation of the egg inside of the ovary. The follicular stimulating hormone is also going to stimulate the release of estrogen. Now, what estrogen is going to do is it's going to start the buildup of the uterine lining. So it's going to initiate saying, uterus, you need to start getting ready. Okay. It's also, through negative feedback, going to inhibit follicular stimulating hormone, FSH. Okay, so as FSH rises, it's going to stimulate estrogen, which is going to then inhibit FSH, so that you don't have too much estrogen. Okay. Estrogen is also then going to stimulate luteinizing hormone. Okay. When luteinizing hormone gets to a certain amount, it is going to trigger ovulation of the fertilized egg by this point. So ovulation is going to happen around day 14. This is when you enter the luteal phase. Beforehand, we were in the follicular phase. So follicular phase is going to be the maturation and the preparation for the egg. Whereas the luteal phase is now when the egg is going to be ovulated. It's going to be released from the ovary. It's going to travel down the follicular tubes where it may or may not be fertilized. Okay, if it is fertilized, it's going to embed itself into the prepared uterus wall. Okay. This wall has been developing since the estrogen levels were increasing, and then this luteinizing hormone is also then going to stimulate the secretion of progesterone. Now progesterone is going to increase, and that's going to make sure that the uterus stays ready to accept this fertilized egg, while also inhibiting luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone. So those two hormones are going to be there for egg production. We don't want any more egg production at the moment. We just want to make sure that there is a ready uterus for the fertilized egg to implant. Now, this is going to last for about a week or so, from about 22 to 28 days. Your progesterone is going to increase, and then if there is no implantation of a fertilized egg, it's going to drop, and that sudden drop in estrogen is going to lead to the shedding of the uterine lining. Okay, and the whole cycle will start again. So how do we control the menstrual cycle to prevent pregnancy? Well, we can go from the hormone route, okay, which is usually through the pill or the patch, and what this is going to do is it's going to have a high level of estrogen and progesterone. And what these two hormones is inhibit the production of FSH through the estrogen, and as well as limiting the amount of luteinizing hormone through the progesterone. Okay. And then what will happen is it controls when ovulation will occur. So as soon as there is a drop in those levels of progesterone during the last days of the pill pack or something like that, it is then going to stimulate the shedding of that lining, regardless of if there is a fertilized egg there or not. Okay. This, however, does have some risks, as it has increased levels of blood clots, cancers, blood clots in the brain as well. That can be extremely dangerous. And it does not prevent STDs. You also have to take that pill every day religiously. Okay. And then another method is barriers, so such as condoms, okay, or a diaphragm. Another one is an IUD. Now, what these do is they stop the egg and sperm from fertilizing. An IUD is an interuterine device, okay. It's kind of like a T-shaped. There's different shaped ones actually, but you get the one that's T-shaped, and it's going to prevent that lining from getting too big. So even if an egg implants itself in the lining, it is going to stimulate the lining to shed. Okay. This, however, doesn't prevent from STDs, but the condoms as well as the diaphragm do prevent STDs. Okay. So yeah, you got to remember to use them, and they can be ineffective. Okay, so that IUD isn't the most effective way of preventing pregnancies. Sometimes it happens anyway, but a condom is 99% effective. Okay. Then you get chemical ways such as spermicide. It kills spermicide. It's not the most effective. I don't think many people use it anymore. I think there used to be a time where people used spermicide, but they don't use that as much anymore, I think. Yeah, it's not very effective. Okay. And then there's the surgical route, such as a vasectomy. Now, the vasectomy can be done on both male and female. Okay. This is when either the male's tubes are tied. Tubes are tied by the testicles. Okay. Or the fallopian tubes can be cut. Okay. Now you see, it can't be reversed in women, but a vasectomy in men can be reversed. Okay. Although it is 100% effective at preventing fertilization, but there have been cases where the fallopian tube or the testicular epididymis will grow over the cut. Okay, will grow over the little string or whatever they use to separate it and to cut it. Okay, so nature always finds a way. So other than preventing pregnancy, there is also ways of having infertility treatment. Okay, and this is for people that are struggling to get pregnant. Okay, it can be due to many reasons, but one of the ways of doing it is to stimulate ovulation. Okay, this is by injecting follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormones. Okay, and this will increase the likelihood of releasing mature eggs. Okay, because that's what you obviously need for pregnancy. This, however, does have a high rate of producing or releasing more than one egg, so it can have a high rate of twins. Now, for someone trying to get pregnant, this can be great, or it can be quite challenging because now you have another child to provide for all of a sudden, which can be quite difficult for some people. And then IVF. Okay, now what IVF is when they perform the fertilization outside of the uterus. Okay, that's the IV in vitro, so in a test tube. This is where they are going to take the egg out of the mother. Okay, they are then going to fertilize it with a sperm from the father, and they are going to do this for multiple eggs. Okay, and then they are going to put these fertilized eggs into the mother. Now they do it for multiple eggs because sometimes it might not embed itself in the uterus. Okay, so you have to increase the probability of that happening by using multiple fertilized eggs, but unfortunately it also increases the chance that more than one egg is going to implant itself in the wall. So if a couple were to go for in vitro fertilization, they should be ready to have triplets if that were to happen. Okay. Now let's look at plant hormones. there are three main types. The first one is auxin. Now auxin is a very popular one in your exams, and this is because it is going to both inhibit and stimulate cell growth at the same time. Now, how does it do this, and why does it do this? So auxin is going to control plant movement. Now when we talk about plant movement, we obviously don't mean the same as how animals move, but plants are still going to move either towards sunlight or they're going to move towards the ground. Probably both, okay? They need certain parts such as the roots to grow down, and they need parts like the stem of the plant to grow towards sunlight, okay, to maximize photosynthesis as well as to maximize water uptake. So the roots need to grow downwards into the soil. Now, how does auxin come into this? Well, in the stems, auxin is going to stimulate cell growth. So it is going to diffuse away from the sun. So if the sun is coming from this direction here, auxin is going to be on this side of the plant, in the shaded side. Okay. Now what's going to happen is when it collects on this side, these cells are going to grow faster than these cells. And so the stem is going to grow towards the light. Okay. When both sides are in equal amounts of light, auxin is going to be dispersed evenly, and so the plant is going to grow towards the sun. Okay. Now that is called phototropism, the growth or the movement of a plant towards light, photo. Then we have gravitropism. Now in the roots it's obviously a bit different, there's no sunlight, so it's not going to be affected by light. What it is affected by is gravity. Okay, so if we have a root, auxin is going to be pulled downwards by gravity, so to these bottom cells. And instead of stimulating growth, it's going to inhibit the growth of these cells. So that means that the top cells are going to be growing faster and the root is going to curve downwards. When the root is in a downwards angle, it is then going to pull at the bottom of the root and then grow at the same rate, to grow downwards. That is called gravitropism. Now the next hormone is called gibberellin. Gibberellin is going to increase fruit size as well as flowering development. Okay, it does this by affecting the rate of germination. So the quicker the flower can germinate, or the quicker the flower can be fertilized and that seed germinate into a seed, the fruit is going to then be prioritized, okay, and it's going to grow around that seed and get bigger and juicier. Okay, so that's from gibberellin. Gibberellin is going to increase fruit size and flower development so that you have more of a season to grow bigger fruits. Okay, so it happens quicker. Then we get ethene. Now ethene is going to stimulate the fruit's ripening. Ethene is used when we are shipping or transporting fruits. So if you don't want them to be overripe by the time they get to the store, we are going to cut them when they are unripe, and then we are going to suck the air out of them during transportation, so out of the room, to pull any of those growth or ripening hormones out of the air. And then when they arrive at our supermarket, they will probably be sprayed with some ethene, okay, and that's going to stimulate them to start ripening so that you can pick it off the shelf and eat it there and then. Sometimes, however, your mango might be a little unripe and you want to eat it tomorrow or the next day. What you can do is pair it with a banana. Bananas release a lot of ethene because they need that whole bunch of bananas to be ripe at once. So if you pair your fruit with a banana, then it's going to ripen it quicker. I think this also works with avocados, because there's nothing worse than getting an unripe avocado and now you can't make guacamole or have it for breakfast because it is still hard and unripe. So put it with a banana and you'll be able to eat it the next day. So here's just a diagram showing phototropism. Okay, as we can see, the auxin is going to diffuse to the shaded side of the plant and thus cause a stimulation in the growth of the cells in that side of the plant, which will lead to the plant moving and aiming itself towards the sunlight. And here's just another diagram showing the exact same thing. Okay, as you can see here, we've got the auxin. Initially, gravity is going to pull both of them downwards. Okay, but in the stem, it stimulates growth, so the plant moves upwards. In the root, it's going to inhibit growth, so the plant moves downwards. That part of the plant. Okay, and then from that point, it is going to either pull in the root's case, or it's going to grow towards the sunlight in the stem's case. And this has been hormones. I'll see you in the next lesson.